Could millions end up paying the price for one man's crime? The president responding to the D.C. shooting by announcing a massive immigration freeze and threatening to deport green card holders and even naturalized citizens if they're deemed insufficiently loyal to the United States. The president says he will halt all immigration from unidentified third world countries, but he's also targeting people who are already here legally. The federal government now launching a review of all green card holders from these 19 countries, identified as so-called countries of concern, where migration was restricted back in June. And last night, the president posted in extraordinarily vague terms that he wants to remove anyone, quote, incapable of loving our country or non-compatible with Western civilization.
This heinous atrocity reminds us that we have no greater national security priority than ensuring that we have full control over the people that enter and remain in our country. For the most part, we don't want them. They come in illegally, have a lot of problems. Their countries force them in because their countries are smart. They don't want them. Let's give them to the Americans to take care of.
I want to bring in MS Now's Akayla Gardner. Allen Orr is an immigration attorney and past president of the American Immigration Lawyers Association. Michael Feinberg served as assistant special agent in charge with the FBI and is an MS Now national security and intelligence analyst. And Brandon Buck was press secretary for Republican House Speakers John Boehner and Paul Ryan and is now an MS Now political analyst. It's great to have you all with us today. Akayla, I want to start with you. Can you break down for us what the president has been saying, what we're hearing from the White House, and how many people could be impacted by this?
Antonia, in the aftermath of this shooting, the president is really ramping up his crackdown on immigration with a focus not just on people who are in this country illegally, but also legally present immigrants. Last night, he announced this permanent pause on migration from all third world countries. We're still seeking clarity about what countries those could be. But here's what we do know. There is a sweeping review that was underway before this shooting of refugees, mostly admitted under the Biden administration, though we understand that could be years outside of Biden as well. About 200,000 refugees could potentially be impacted by that review, which could entail re-interviewing some refugees. And there also is this review of green card holders from so-called countries of concern. It's a group of 19 countries. And the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services issued new guidance yesterday saying that there's going to be new country-specific factors that they say will help identify someone who could potentially be a threat to public safety and national security. They say that could include an assessment of a country's ability to issue secure identity documents. But this could be anyone with a green card from these 19 countries, including Venezuela, Cuba, Afghanistan as well. And this all comes after Wednesday's shooting and criticism of one specific program known as Operation Allies Welcome. The president was asked about an inspector general report of that program. Take a listen.
Your DOJ IG just reported this year that there was thorough vetting by DHS and by the FBI of these Afghans who were brought into the U.S. So why do you blame the Biden administration?
Because they let them in. Are you stupid? Are you a stupid person? Because they came on a plane along with thousands of other people that shouldn't be here, and you're just asking questions because you're a stupid person. And there's a law passed that it's almost impossible not to get them out. You can't get them out once they come in. And they came in, and they were unvetted, they were unchecked, there were many of them, and they came in on big planes, and it was disgraceful.
And Tony, I really think it's important to put in context that the suspect in custody was granted asylum under this administration, the Trump administration, even though the president continues to blame Biden for initially granting him humanitarian parole back in 2021. He also worked with the CIA in Afghanistan, which would have required extensive vetting, and all of that is raising questions about why exactly he decided to carry out this attack.
Akayla Gardner, thank you so much for your reporting today. Allen, look, a lot of what Akayla just described there would represent sweeping changes to the immigration system, to people's personal lives and their families here in the United States. What we've seen in the president's posts and recent comments, to put it diplomatically, leave us with a lot more questions than answers with this latest crackdown. How are you as an attorney preparing to even start parsing what this means for the people that you work with?
I think we should start with the text and the text of the Constitution and the presidential powers and its limitations. So many of the things that he has professed, much like he did in his presidential executive orders, are wishes and desires that he cannot fulfill without Congress. So that's the first thing we need to decide. What is the realm that Congress needs to take care of, and then what the president needs to take care of? And then the second thing is to speak to the American people about this extreme vetting, this fiction that you can go to a shelf and pull off extreme vetting, and that the vetting that we are already doing currently is extreme vetting. When one goes to the airport, there isn't an additional line for extreme vetting. There's a line for less vetting, but not extreme vetting. So that's sort of a fiction that we've made. The third thing we really need to be concerned with is framing foreign nationals as national security threats. And that's very dangerous, as we've seen 80 people who have died in the ocean for this very same reason, an attack on immigration. So once we have that contextually framed, then we understand that many of the things that the president wants to do to individuals in the United States will require immigration courts and federal courts and due process. And while those things have been hampered, they're not completely ineffective at this point in time. So that's how we're sort of conditioning our clients right now to understand. I mean, last week or the week before, the president also made a policy that he was tracking irregular movement of foreign nationals in the United States. And the issue has been, and I want to say it clearly, that when you make everyone a threat, then you can't really focus on what the real threats are. And a lot of the issues that might have been able to address this have been moved to taking care of house cleaners and people who are picking our vegetables, rather than handling things that were handled appropriately in the past. Tens of thousands of agents have been reassigned. So that's where we are right now, just in a mess of disarray with immigration. And we've seen this happen after 9/11. That's why the Department of Homeland Security exists. That's supposed to be the extreme vetting that exists. And continuing to sell people that moving the chairs around on the deck really changes your security isn't really effective.
Brendan, the president has used a lot of interesting phrases. There's been some heated political rhetoric in just the last few days. Last night, he said he specifically wants to, quote, denaturalize migrants who undermine domestic tranquility. So can you help me decode that language in the context of the larger aims, the campaign that President Trump and folks like Stephen Miller outlined for this administration?
I can't decode it because that's not how we make laws in this country. We set out actual real benchmarks and things that need to happen, and it isn't just up to the whims of the president. But look, obviously what's going on here is this is an administration for whom almost every problem, the answer is cracking down on immigration, whether it's housing prices or food or, of course, crime. To them, the answer is there's an immigration problem. And so it's not surprising that no matter what the sort of facts of the case here are, that they're going to use it as an opportunity to reinforce their already standing policy position here. We know that high ranks of this administration, of course, including the president, but also very senior people there, believe their number one priority is this mass deportation program. Now, of course, the facts of this situation are something that I don't think they probably want to talk about. Now, the person who allegedly committed this crime is nobody we should have any sympathy for at this time. But you're talking about categories of people. The people who worked with our government in Afghanistan were exactly the types that all of us, universally almost, I guess I should say, not everybody, but most of us thought were the exact type of people who should find a home here in America. They risked their own lives to help Americans in a dangerous place. That wasn't that controversial. Now, of course, what happened here is a tragedy, and we should figure out what went wrong. But it's one of those situations where they don't really want to get into the details of why that type of person is here. And I think that we are now at a place where they don't even have sympathy for the people who risk their lives overseas to help American soldiers. Anybody who is not a natural-born citizen, they just simply don't want here. And I think that's a real shame.
Michael, if the stated goal here is to make America safer, is this plan, or at least the concept of a plan that we've seen at this stage from the president, is it going to achieve that?
No, not remotely. It is going to make America less safe in quite a few different reasons, which the administration does not seem to have foreseen or be willing to address. The first is that, just as a matter of statistics, immigrant communities commit much less violent crime than, quote, native-born Americans. That's just a matter of statistical certainty. It is what it is, and this administration has never addressed that. So mass deportation is not actually going to put a dent in the crime rate. I suppose if you were only focusing on violent criminals for deportation, you might have some sort of impact, and that's what the administration claims to do. But if you actually look at the numbers of who they're forcing out of the country and who they're arresting, the overwhelming majority have no criminal record. But there's sort of an unintended consequence of this too, which is America's safety depends largely upon the effectiveness of its intelligence communities. And if we turn around today and tell every single Afghani that helped the CIA or the US military that we are not going to have your back in the long run, the next time there is a major conflict in another part of the world, the people indigenous to that part of the world are going to remember this and refuse to help the CIA and the US military. We're going to need translators. We're going to need assets. We're going to need human sources. If we continually throw them under the bus to score political points, there's going to be nobody left in the world who's willing to help us when we need it.
Allen, to take a step back for a moment, do we know if what the president is proposing is even legal? And how quickly do you expect there to be challenges to all of this?
Immediately, there will be challenges immediately. We already know from his first administration, because when we say there are going to be travel restrictions, they're basically travel bans. These are travel bans that he's existing. And while he can definitely hamper the individuals coming to the country from those countries, but he cannot remove the individuals already in the country without some other bearing of an immigration court. And he definitely can't get someone who has a green card instantly removed without a long judicial sort of fight. So with the court clog that exists, we know that this is not a power that's within the purview of the president at all. And what we have found is that this is scapegoating that is used to bring prejudice against certain groups of immigrants, certain types of immigrants, and they're usually immigrants of color and immigrants who lack financial ability.
Michael, we've talked about the fact that this suspect is an Afghan national who was admitted to the U.S. in September of 2021. That's at a time when the U.S. was welcoming vulnerable people who had worked alongside U.S. forces. Here's what Jeanine Pirro, though, said about that process earlier today. Take a listen.
There was no vetting. If you think there was vetting, I have a bridge to sell you. If you saw the chaos that was going on at that airport in Kabul, in Afghanistan, it was typical of what was going on in the Biden administration. And the Pentagon, I believe it was Kirby and people in the Biden administration said the Afghan withdrawal that we all know was disastrous was a success. And that's a quote. So let's stop namby-pambing around with this, oh, he was vetted. There was no vetted. The welcome mat was thrown down.
Kayla said this earlier, but it bears repeating that this man was granted asylum under the Trump administration earlier this year. So what is going to go into determining what actually happened with the vetting process? And is any of what we just heard Pirro say there true, that there was no vetting going on at the time? And if you believe that, she could sell you a bridge?
Look, Pirro is somebody with virtually no experience whatsoever in the federal government or how the various agencies work together or how the executive branch as a uniform entity moves in sync. You know, she sits in the U.S. Attorney's Office, but it's clear that she has not totally given up the job of being a partisan talking head, because the fact is there was a lot of vetting done here. And that brings me to my second point, which is people need to realize, mainly today, Trump's administration, but also those who oppose it, vetting is not a panacea. All vetting can tell us is what's happened in the past with somebody. It is not a guarantee that they are never going to stray from the line of legality in the future. There's no process, no database, no mechanism by which we can look into somebody's heart and soul and figure out whether they're going to commit a criminal act at a later date. All we can do is see, have they been the sort of person that would be a benefit and no danger to the United States based on their past actions? And the suspect in this case was literally going on operations on behalf of the CIA. So even if they had a more stringent vetting process than they claim the United States did, it's unclear to me how that would have made any difference whatsoever in this particular case.
Brendan, I'm curious if you think there will be any soul searching in this moment, because in a way, this is a repeat or a revisiting of a conversation that goes back to 2021, when there was a schism in the Republican Party, people debating the treatment of Afghans who had served alongside U.S. forces. People like Lindsey Graham, John Cornyn, John Kennedy, Bill Cassidy, all voted in favor of a program known as Operation Allies Welcome. There were the sort of anti-interventionist isolationist forces, who disagreed with that at the time. But many Republicans were supportive of making sure that these people were resettled in the U.S., that they were safe and secure, that their wives, their children were not under Taliban rule at the time. Do you see is there going to be any soul searching around all of that in this moment as the president makes all of these sweeping changes? And do you think this is evidence of a similar or a growing divide within the party right now?
Well, honestly, I think the party is shifting much more in the direction of what Donald Trump was espousing, what we played earlier. Look, there are certainly national security Republicans in Congress who understand what we've been talking about, how important it is for people abroad working with our intelligence agencies and military to know that we're going to support them and to have programs that account for that. However, Donald Trump using the language that he does is extremely powerful for a lot of people. And it reaffirms a lot of people's priors about the country being too liberal with its immigration policies. And so I wouldn't expect a whole lot of people to stand up and say, hold on, Mr. President, we supported, categories of people just like this. This is only going to inflame the emerging right that has no place for anybody from outside of our borders. So there is still definitely I think a breakdown in the party along these lines, but that strong national security party, or at least that party who just understands the fundamental principle that there are people who do good for this country outside of America, are probably going to keep their mouth shut, I would imagine, because Donald Trump has so dominated this space, and there just isn't a whole lot of room for argument for them to win it.
Brendan Buck, Michael Feinberg, and Allen Orr, thank you all so much for joining us this afternoon.